Welcome back to another episode of the Sunday Stash. This is episode number 8. So I'm coming out with this video a little bit late when I normally try to get them released on Sunday. It should be on Tuesday here, but I wasn't able to do some of the research that I wanted to do earlier this week because I ended up having to go into work over the weekend and deal with some stuff. I had a coworker that came down with some COVID symptoms, so I ended up going in and taking care of some stuff for him. And I had to work. I stepped in on the weekend, and I normally don't end up working the weekend, so it kind of ruined my plans and stuff. But I don't mind. I was helping out a friend, so no big deal. So I'm also, I've been trying to take care of a few things with Thanksgiving coming up, and it's been a pretty hectic first day of the week as well. So it was pretty crazy. So short week, kind of tough. So anyway, let's get into the topic this week. I'm going to be talking about student loans. With the increasing push to have student loans forgiven, I wanted to take an opportunity to give my opinion on this topic. It's something that's been in the news for a while, and it's been a growing issue for many people, roughly in the age range between 22, I guess, right out of college, and somewhere between 40 and 50. There are some older adults that have student loans. It's not as many, but there are some that still have student loans at a much older age. But anyway, with this, I will likely, I think I'm going to likely bother some people with my opinion, since I personally believe that the government should not forgive student loans. But I have some real reasons, and what I believe are good reasons as to why the government shouldn't forgive student loans, and I'll get into those if you stick around to the end of this video. So the thing that made me think about this in particular this week was the prospect that Joe Biden will sign an executive order to forgive up to $10,000 of student loan debt per borrower. So, what's the big deal with all of this student loan debt? How much is it that we have in the U.S.? I think that the numbers will actually be quite surprising to many people, and realistically, I think the number of total people in the United States that have student loan debt will likely be surprising to many people. So, according to borrowersbill.com, our total student loan debt is roughly $1.7 trillion. Now, I also found another number with CNBC, and they had it in an article from June of 2020. The total debt was $1.6 trillion. So 1.7, 1.6. When your numbers are that big, what's another 100 billion, right? So, if you search how many Americans have student loan debt, it will come up in a Google search with 45 million. So I would actually say that, $1.7 trillion, that was a little bit surprising to me. I didn't know that it was quite that high. In addition to that, I also didn't know that only 45 million people in the United States have student loan debt. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, the actual total population of the United States is right now roughly 328 million people. So 45 million out of 328 isn't really that much. Now, I try not to do anything, twisting numbers around or anything like that. And if I really wanted to act like the media, then I'd twist the numbers around and I'd say, well, only 13% of Americans have student loan debt. Looks like that's not a big problem, right? 13%. I could also, scream and say, well, look, if I was kind of trying to make the argument the other way and say, oh my God, 45 million people have student loan debt. So, and that right there, you can look at that and you can say, well, it's not a big problem. 13% of people have student loan debt. If you're trying to say, it's not a big problem. And if you want to say it's a huge problem, you can be like, oh, well, look, 45 million people have debt. Or you can actually even look at the number and say $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. But let's actually dive into the numbers a little bit more and figure out maybe, what's really going on here. All right, so 328 million people in the United States. So I think it's about 20 to 23% of those people are actually under the age of 18. So realistically, that's about 74 million people that don't have student loan debt. They're not going to even factor in because they're not in college or they're not in school yet or anything like that. They're likely going to end up having some. But currently, of the 45 million people, they don't factor into that because they're under the age of 18. And, so that leaves us with 254 million people that have some, right? Now, as long as my math is correct, that puts us at about 18% of Americans that are eligible to have student loan debt. Now, if we take a step further and, actually look at the tax-paying Americans, because that's who is ultimately going to end up holding this burden if the federal government decides we're going to start forgiving some of that. We have, this is according to the taxfoundation.org, there are 143 million tax-paying Americans. So 74 million people that are under the age of 18, and then only 143 million people are paying taxes. Now, that's a number from 2017. It's likely more than that, so we can maybe run on an assumption that maybe 150 million people are tax-paying Americans currently. So anyway, that pushes, right, if we use that 143 million people, that pushes our number of, with 45 million student loan borrowers, pushes us to about 30%. So about 30% of tax-paying Americans have student loans. Now, the idea is that what we're going to do, if Joe Biden is legally allowed to sign this executive order, which I'm not a lawyer, so I have absolutely no idea whether he's actually allowed to do this or not. But if he is able to do that, the idea is that we're going to end up asking the other 70% of tax-paying Americans, basically they would be the ones to foot the bill for the other 30% of people that have the debt. And if we take it a little bit further and we look at that 44 or the 45 million people, there are about 10% of those people that actually aren't even either paying their loans or they're over 90 days past due. So it's not really fair for the 70% of Americans to then pay for the other 30%, in which I guess 10% of that 30% aren't even making payments at all. So that's something to definitely think about. So why are these people not paying their loans? There could be a lot of reasons. I'm not sure right now, but I think there are some laws in place that allow during COVID for people to not pay their loans. They're in forbearance and everything like that. So they could just be not paying them because they just don't want to. They could not have a job. I think unemployment currently in the United States is about 10%. So there's a lot of people that do not currently have jobs and are not working. So there's a lot of different reasons why people would not be paying on their student loans. I actually had two siblings that went to school, one older and one younger. My older brother decided when he was done with school, he wasn't going to pay his. A lot of it had to do with the inability to find a job. He graduated, or he finished school in 2008, so that was right after the housing crash, and there was really not a lot of people hiring. And then my younger brother, so my older brother actually ended up getting all of his stuff taken care of. He, after enough time went by, he ended up working a deal with the collections agency or whoever it was that was chasing him down. He just kind of threw him some cash in a lump sum, and they said, "All right, thanks, man. We're done with you." So they got some money out of him, but not everything that he technically owed. And then my other brother, younger brother, he graduated, I think, in 2012. Still not a great time for the economy. Things were growing, things were better, definitely, but it still wasn't 100%. And he ended up not really paying much of his, and my dad actually co-signed on his loan. So my dad right now is kind of paying the minimum payments on those as best as he can. So it definitely sucks for some people out there. So I've definitely seen firsthand the many different situations in this student loan crisis that we've got. So obviously 44 million Americans have student loans, or 45 million Americans, I mean, and we have this huge problem, right? It's not really that big of a problem if you think about it and you say, well, only 18% of 18 and above adults have student loans, or 30% of tax-paying Americans have loans, right? I would definitely agree that it would be a huge problem if maybe like 60% or 70% of tax-paying Americans had student loan debt and they were having issues paying their bills and everything like that. At 18%, it doesn't really, to me, 18% is not that much. If we're talking about an 18% fatality rate for something, then 18% is fairly high. But 18% for a debt, people holding a debt, especially a debt that they went to school for, and it was a chosen debt, 18% is really not all that bad. But where did this all come from? Where did this problem start? Where did the student loan issues really kind of come from? And I actually really had a hard time pinpointing an actual legitimate time frame of when these problems started. I guess I can travel back into the 1950s, right around 1958, when the National Defense Education Act was passed. And, we were losing the space race to the Russians, and we needed more scientists. So Congress passed this bill, or this act, that allowed more money to flow to science-based education. But that isn't necessarily where the problem started. That's one thing that you can kind of point to and say, hey, the federal government saw we were deficient in one area and we needed to get better. Then you fast forward a couple of years, 1965, the Higher Education Act was passed, which was intended to strengthen the education resources of our colleges and universities and provide financial assistance to students in post-secondary or higher education. I think I ended up getting that information from Wikipedia, and I know Wikipedia is not a scholarly source, but it still has pretty decent information on there. So then that act was passed. You go forward a little bit of time, and back in the 80s, during the Reagan era, the states started passing a lot of limitations on taxes, about the amount of money that they could charge people in taxes. which then ended up leading to basically less revenue for the state, and the state had to start limiting the budget. And once the state started limiting the budget, they ended up looking at colleges and universities and saying, well, we need to actually reduce the amount of money that we're spending on them. So the colleges and universities said, well, we still need to make money, and their only choice was to either cut their budget or raise tuition. So that's the first time I think you kind of see a raise in tuition. The estimates are these numbers are adjusted for inflation. So in 1980, the average cost of a single year at a public university was about $7,900, and at a private school it was $17,000. And about 10 years later, the amount that it would cost to go to a public school had risen roughly $2,000 to $9,800, and the cost to go to a private school had risen about $9,000 to $26,000. So at that point, you can start to see an increase, but that doesn't necessarily mean that student loans themselves were increasing. That just kind of means that the price of school was going up. So if you fast forward sometime into the early 2000s, online education started to increase. And what you started to see was, I guess, larger for-profit institutions started to increase their acceptance rate. Now, with that being said, the information I was able to find is that maybe in the early 2000s, acceptance rates started to increase, but then in 2007, acceptance rates started to fall. Now, with that being said, I think that 2007, 2008, and then about 2010 are the really the time frame that we can kind of throw all this blame on a few pieces of legislation that were implemented that allowed a lot of changes. So around 2007, college prices started to increase, and they started increasing at 3 times the rate of inflation. So it wasn't really growing with inflation, or just growing over time because money was worth less or anything like that. It just started to cost more. So what was it that spiked this? All right, you could say it was an increase in tuition cost, which is probably true. The cost of an education has risen every single year, and I'll get to that in a second with an own personal story about my cost of education. But one of the things in 2008, you see the Higher Education Act that I mentioned earlier that was initially passed in 1965 was reauthorized, and along with that came the College Cost Reduction in Access Act. And this was to help millions of Americans, millions of low-income Americans get a college degree. And that's how George Bush had put it when he had signed the bill into law. So you have the Higher Education Act of 2008 gets reauthorized. Then in 2010, Obama cut out the big banks and essentially started loaning money straight to borrowers, straight to students. So the Department of Education quickly grew into the largest student loan holder, or basically the person who would loan the most amount of student loans in the entire country. This happened along with the Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act, and all of these changes, the changes in 2008 and the changes in 2010, it made it easier for students, for anybody, to get access to loans, and the federal government is the one holding them. So I guess really it's the taxpayers that were holding those loans. Now, over the past 10 to 20 years, so if you start from 2000, the cost of in education has dramatically increased. People are also, they're able to borrow more and more money, and they're continuing to borrow more and more money. In today, in 2020, people are coming away from college. If you have less than a bachelor's degree, so roughly an associate's degree, it's costing about $13,000 a year to get that. Then a bachelor's degree from a public university is $27,000. Private nonprofit is $30,000. Private for-profit is $41,000. I think it's important to note that a postgraduate education normally is $45,000. And these are all student loan debt. So this is the average amount of money that someone owes for an associate's degree was $13,000. Public school is $27,000, private nonprofit $30,000, private for-profit $41,000, postgraduate $45,000, and some of the higher education-based things would be a PhD. If you're going to go get a PhD, roughly $100,000. Law degree, I said $113,000, and then a medical degree was $223,000. So, those last ones, PhD, a law degree, medical, you would assume that those people are going to end up having high-paying jobs, so they really would not run on an expectation that they are going to have a hard time paying those loans back. So we'll see. With all of that information, I encourage anybody to go out there and do their own research. Really actually look at the numbers before you make a decision based on your opinion. There's no need to actually listen to me. I can kind of give my opinion and point you in a direction, maybe not a right direction, but point you in a direction. But do your own research, develop your own opinions on these things. In my opinion, the show, The Patriot Act, actually has really 2 good episodes and about student loans and whether or not college is still worth it, and they're definitely worth watching. The show is not active anymore, but I think they still have the episodes available on Netflix, and I know that they have the episodes available on YouTube because I've watched them recently. Every time the student loan thing comes up, I decide to go back and watch that kind of stuff. So they provide a decent amount of really good information that anybody would be benefited from and going and checking out. So now that we've taken a look at the actual numbers, I want to kind of cover my own personal experience with student loans and everything like that. So my journey with all of this started back in 2006. I graduated from high school. In the spring, the fall of 2006, I went to a small private school called Bridgewater College, and my freshman year was roughly $24,000, and it rose $2,000 every year until I graduated. So sophomore year was 26, junior year was 28, and senior year was 30. And then the follow-on year, which would have been 2011, it was $32,000 a year. And the only reason I know that is because they had they'd given me something in my mailbox. I think they gave it to everybody that had a mailbox there on campus. And I had just, seen it and saw that they were charging $32,000 for the next year. And I was, at that point, I was very, very glad that I was able to finish my school in 4 years. For that, with a little bit of context, all of that money, that $32,000 for the year of 2011, that was including lodging and food. So everyone at that school lives on campus, and you eat on campus as well, unless you want to go out in town and get anything, but that's obviously going to be extra money. The meals are included in your tuition. So, and I think today, and this is roughly 10 years after I've graduated, it costs $57,000 a year to go to school there. So it's fairly crazy, the amount of money that it has risen. So with all that being said, in addition to all that, I still had to pay for my own books. That's a cost that they generally don't factor in. They don't tell you about is you got to pay for your own books. So I actually did not pay bookstore prices for most of my books. I actually, my cousin had just gone to school, or just graduated right before I had gone to school, so she actually told me about a website called half.com, and then this wonderful website that everyone knows today called Amazon.com. So if you go back into my Amazon search history, or not search history, but purchase history, back in 2006 to roughly 2010, I bought nothing but books from Amazon. Today it's just a random assortment of things that Amazon offers, but back in 2010, 2006, 2010, it was just books. So that was it. So anyway, in total, my education technically costs roughly a little over $100,000. So, what was it that I, graduating in 2010, came away with? I grew up quite poor, so I got a lot of student aid, like financial aid and everything like that. So when I finished school, I completed in 4 years with roughly $40,000 in student loan debt. Now, I am happy with everything that I did in college. I'm glad that I went. It sucks that I had $40,000 in student loans, but it is what it is. There's nothing I can do to go back and change anything about it right now. I was part of the generation that was essentially told, go to school. When you get out of school, there's going to be a good job for you. And that's what I believed. 2006, I graduated from high school. Thought there was going to be lots and lots of stuff. The economy was growing, everything was booming. There was no issues with anything. It seemed as though the good times were never going to end. It was like the roaring 20s, but in the early 2000s. So then, when I graduated in 2010. I got out of college, and there was not really much of anything available. So there wasn't really a whole lot of people hiring. It was so bad that in between my junior year and senior year, the company that I normally had actually worked for the previous 3 summers basically told me that they couldn't afford to bring me on because they were making so little money that year. So it was definitely rough. So I got out of college, I started looking for jobs, and there really wasn't a lot available. There was a lot available. I think I was looking all in the wrong places. I was less willing to move as I probably should have been. And I wasn't very confident in my ability to make it out in the real world, I guess. So it was definitely a tough experience for me at first. So I started looking for jobs, and I didn't really find much. Eventually, I ended up working at Target for a little while before I got the job that I have now, which is, in my opinion, is awesome. And at that point, I saw this huge debt. I saw this $40,000 in debt, and I saw the fact that I was making, I think it was about $10 an hour. And I thought, there's no way I'm paying this off. So I knew I had about 6 months to pay it off. Not to pay it off. I had 6 months before I had to make my first payment. So I did a little bit of research. I called the loan company. I had multiple different loans at multiple different companies. I called them, and I talked to them about my financial situation. And in that conversation, I definitely remember, they were talking about forbearance and the graduated plans, right? Those are the two. You have a normal repayment plan, which is you just make the basic payment. Then you can do forbearance, or you can do a graduated plan. So a for, at the time, I really didn't know what the difference was. And when I didn't have any idea of, much about finances or anything like that. So at the time, I had no idea what the difference between forbearance and graduated plans were. So forbearance is basically the payments stop for a certain amount of time. And the key to that is the interest is still building and you aren't paying on that interest. So it's basically just tacking on top of your principal. It's essentially compounding interest in the opposite direction. It's, compounding interest when you're making money is awesome, but compounding interest when you're building a loan debt really kind of sucks. So, I chose to do the graduated plan. They pushed the forbearance on me pretty hard because they knew exactly what was going to happen if I put the loans into forbearance. I was just going to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. So a graduated plan is, you basically you pay more or less like an income-based thing where you have smaller payments at first, where most of the time you're paying just like interest at the beginning, and after 2 years the amount increases, and then it starts to increase every 2 years after that. And that plan isn't too bad. And basically, if the idea is that you're going to make much more money later on in life, so right now you pay a smaller amount and you have more money to be able to essentially do whatever it is that you want out in your regular life. And then, you're going to be just paying like small payments. So then as time goes, you then start to make much higher payments later on. So I chose the graduated plan at first, and I kept that for probably 3 to 4 years. And then I eventually started making more money, got a raise, and I said, you know what? I got to start doing something about this. So I changed a lot of stuff. I was very frugal at the time, but I changed a lot, and I basically just started throwing money at my student loans. So I was paying $800 a month for the loans, and then every 3 months I would pay $1,100 a month because I had another loan that was a quarterly payment that I paid $300 for. So $800 a month every single month, plus every 3 months I was paying another $300 on top of that. So I did that for 3 to 4 years and basically was able to pay them off in what totaled out to be roughly 8 years. So I finished paying my student loans off in 2018, mid-2018. So it took me roughly 8 years to get it all paid off. Maybe just a tad less than 8 years to pay it off. So that's more or less my story with that. I know that, I had so I had 3 loan servicing companies that I dealt with. So I had FedLoan, I had AES, which is American Education Services, and then technically the third one was that was the quarterly payment, and I actually paid that back to the school that I went to. The AES loan also was that was something that it got transferred to that company part of the way through the repayment of the loan. So those are the loan servicing companies that I had, and I got very lucky. My brother, on the other hand, my younger brother, he actually had Navient, which I have heard nothing good about in their loan servicing stuff. And Navient's one of the ones that's covered in the Patriot Act, and they talk about just how bad and how predatory they were as a loan servicer. So that's my story with all of that. Now we see, I had a big problem at the time, and it took me time to pay it off, and we've got those 44, million Americans that have that student loan debt, but where do we go from here? Do we just tell them, oh, suck it up, you're going to have to just wait, just pay it off, just get a job, get a good job and pay it off? Is that what we're going to do? You know, back during the Democratic debates, this was not a big topic, but this was a topic that had come up. And some of them had actually talked about, paying, basically forgiving everyone's loans, which I didn't really agree with. And a lot of the times when this stuff comes up, I actually start to get a little bit mad about it because, I paid mine off. I took 8 years to do it, which is, a long time. It's a quarter of it's 25% of my life right now that I was in this massive debt. I sacrificed certain things, right? I'm not married currently. A lot of that has to do with my frugal nature. I don't like to spend money, and sometimes, to find a spouse, a lot of the times women don't like you when you don't like to spend money on them. So, my frugal nature has kind of gotten in the way of that. I don't have kids right now, and that was a conscious effort that I had to not complicate my life before I was able to then pay some things off. I ended up having my car is not a fancy car. It is just a basic 4-cylinder car that gets me from point A to point B. I like it. It's a nice little hatchback, but it doesn't really do anything fancy. It doesn't have a lot of power. It's not turboed or anything like that. And what I chose to do in my personal life was I rented a room from a guy that I worked with. So I was able to pay him only $500 a month for the room, and then I was able to end up taking a vast majority of my excess money and throwing it to my student loan. So that was a choice that I personally made. So that's the reasons why I usually get pretty mad, because I'm like, I paid my stuff off. I did what I was supposed to do. And now what's going to end up happening is, the federal government's going to step in and say, oh, well, I guess if you guys can't do it, we're going to take care of it for you. It kind of pisses me off. So here are some possible solutions that I have kind of come up with, and they're not necessarily going to be the best solutions around, but these are some things that I was actually thinking about. So anyway, since they are government loans, I think that maybe something that they could do is maybe they stop the interest, basically push those interest rates to zero, or push those interest rates to basically trail inflation. That way the borrowers are just paying back their principal balance. I think it's possibly a good way of going about doing it. The government's not going to get rich off of these loans, but they're also not going to end up taking a huge hit on the taxpayers. Over time, people would not be going into deeper and deeper debt if they didn't have the interest on their loans. So I think that might be a possible workaround, a solution. It would have less of an impact on everybody else. So I think you might be able to convince a few people that people would still pay their loans back, but we're not going to charge them interest. So that's one possible solution. Another solution that I do have is we need to actually activate and actually use the student loan forgiveness program that came out a couple of years ago, maybe 13-ish years ago. I think it was 2007. This came out, where essentially what you would do is all you had to do was make your minimum payments and work in a qualifying job for 10 years of public service. and the government would essentially forgive those loans. But that program has been completely mismanaged, and the vast majority of people have not gotten their loans actually forgiven. I think only about 4% of the people that have applied for it have actually been approved to have their loans forgiven. So that's a pretty atrocious response from the federal government on that part. So, if someone is paid their debt to society, then they should be forgiven for the mistakes that they made. I'm obviously talking about student loans here, but if someone did hold up their end of the bargain, then the federal government should hold up their end of the bargain. Now, the last option is to have the government step in and forgive those loans. This, in my opinion, is a bad idea. It's not what we should do. I don't think that the government should do that. In my opinion, life is about choices. You took out the loan. It's what it is. I took out my $40,000 in student loan debt. I would not expect the rest of the world or the rest of the United States to then pay into taxes to pay mine off. It would have been awesome if they did. If that's the way that it worked out, if that's what we all signed on for, then that's what it is. But you can't just go changing things part of the way through. A lot of people, they don't end up choosing the best career field, the best degree. You can easily Google or Bing, if you're a Bing kind of guy, and search and find out what the highest earning industries are. You can choose a community college and go there first to reduce your costs. You can, you can do that, and then you can also bypass that college experience, which I think most people probably wouldn't want to do that, because everybody has those stories from college. You got those friends from college that you still talk to, and you could do all of those things, but I don't think that the government should step in and take care of that stuff for people. I don't think that it's fair that for a lot of these other people, the working Americans, to have to step in and pay for those loans that someone else took. It's not fair for the 45 million Americans that have student loans to then go and ask the rest of America to pay for it. It's my opinion. Just think that's what it is. With that being said, there is one stat that I had left out earlier, and I kind of left this stat out intentionally so that I could talk about it down here, about one of the reasons why I don't think that we should be talking about forgiving all student loan debt. Okay, so from this stat is, from what I could find, 40% of all of that debt is held by people with graduate degrees. Now, that is more than 4 years of college. If my math is correct, that turns out to be roughly $680 billion. So $680 billion of that $1.7 trillion is held by people that have graduate degrees. Now, that could be a graduate degree in something that doesn't matter, or that could be a graduate degree in medicine or law, or something that is a very high earning area. So that's another statistic. 40% of that debt is held by people that make a lot of money, that assumingly make a lot of money. So it's still not fair to have the rest of America pay for that $680 billion. If you cut out that part, maybe we can talk about that. But it's unlikely that that part is going to get cut out. So where do we go? What do we do moving forward? We're going to have to do something. If we're not going to end up, if we're not going to end up having the government do this, so what do we do? Or even if we do have the government do this, what do we do from here, right? How do we keep ourselves from running into this situation in the future? How do we keep the next generation from running into the same mistakes or making the same mistakes that we do? Because ultimately, that's what we're here to do. We're here to teach our kids. We're here to teach the younger generation the knowledge about life, and hope that they don't make the same decisions. Hope that they don't make the same mistakes. So what we should do, number one, is you fix the reason as to why college is so expensive. Maybe streamline some of the administrative tasks that colleges have. That's something that we can do. Stop paying, millions and millions of dollars to coaches, millions of dollars to presidents, and everything like that. Maybe we could use some of the millions of dollars that these huge universities pull in from the NCAA, where they're just taking advantage of student athletes in the hopes that they're going to end up having a professional career, and put that back into the rest of the students. I know that's a little bit of a socialist statement that I just made there, but I do think that could help out. That could help out reduce the cost for everyone else. If we're talking about giving everyone an opportunity to better themselves, put some of that money that these sports teams are making to use for everybody, as opposed to building, as they described in the Patriot Act, a lazy river at LSU. So you can Google that if you want to see that, and be disgusted at the money that they waste on certain things. Another thing is go to if nothing's going to happen to the cost of large schools, right? Large school, private schools, large universities, and anything like that. If nothing's going to happen to the cost of an education there, another solution is go to a community college first. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but community college, especially a local one, live with your parents. Work. If your parents don't want you to move out immediately when you turn 18, but live with your parents, work. Go to that community college for 2 years. Take the basic classes. Math 101 is essentially the same no matter what school you go to. There's not really a whole lot that changes. You're not going to end up taking Math 101 with some, super prestigious mathematician. Maybe you do. Maybe that's what you want to do. But Math 101 is pretty much the same everywhere. English 101, pretty much the same everywhere. Take a look at the college and everything, and make sure that you end up, that your credits and stuff will transfer over. But go to community college first. They're local. They're usually very much less expensive. Another option: go to a trade school and take out as little debt as possible, and start working and making money from there. That's another option. And then if you do take out loans and you find yourself in this position where you graduate and you don't know what it is that you're going to do, you have this huge debt hanging over your head. My first piece of advice for that is head over on YouTube and listen to Dave Ramsey. He has a lot of really good advice on how to, work towards being debt free. Now, some of the stuff that he covers, I'm actually going to say right here. Biggest thing I'd say is never eating out. Restaurants cost so much money. That's definitely not something that you want to end up wasting money on. Another thing, work a second job. Do it while you're young. It's easy. You're not married. You don't have kids. Your life hasn't been, and this sounds bad, but your life hasn't been complicated yet. You don't have to take care of your kids. You're not trying to spend time with a spouse. All the extra work that you do when you're young is going to pay off huge when you get older. Another thing, don't forget to save for your future. Money invested when you're young, thrown in with compounding interest, grows an enormous amount. So don't forget to start investing in yourself, and do that at a young age. If you can do that from even before college, learn about investing and learn about spending money and learn about finances. It's a very good thing. Another piece of advice: have roommates. Be willing to do that. Rent a room or share a residence with your friends. That reduces the amount of housing costs that you have. Housing costs throughout the United States have skyrocketed here in the recent years. So that's one option that you can take, is to share with people. I know that sometimes it sucks, and you got to make sure you choose your roommates wisely, but share a room. One big piece of advice: don't go into forbearance, or don't do the graduated plan, in my opinion. Definitely look it up to see if it's something that fits for you, but I would say don't go into forbearance. That one's pretty much a bad plan all around. Pay extra in your loans. Make sure pay extra if you can. But the biggest thing with that is make sure that there's not an early payment fee, or like an early repayment fee or something like that. I know sometimes some loans have that. If there is, do the math and see if the early repayment fee is more than the interest that you would get charged on just paying it off, normally on time. That's something to look into. If you pay extra, make sure you talk to the company and make sure that money is going to the actual loan itself. I have heard, and this is not proven, it's purely just anecdotal, but I have heard of people saying that sometimes when you give extra money to the loan servicing company, what they'll basically do is they'll hold it, and they'll hold it in a separate pile, and that then is, basically they'll just tell you that you're ahead in payments. So pay attention to that. Make sure that the money that you are paying is actually going to your loans themselves. Another option is you can refinance for a lower interest rate, or you can consolidate. But do the research and make sure that is actually the best thing for you. I did not refinance my loans. I probably could have, I guess, but I had a fairly low interest rate, so I decided I didn't need to do that. And realistically, I'd say probably with all of this, the best advice that I can give, and this is roughly the same thing that Dave Ramsey would say, is make a budget and stick to it. You have to be strict with yourself. You can't let other people judge you for being cheap, for not spending money. If you stick with it, and you stick through those tough times, you'll be laughing in a few years when all your debt's paid off. And now what you have is you've got all of these great money habits that you're used to, now that you don't have the debt, and you're likely making more money. So then at that point, you can still continue to be frugal and save money and save for retirement. Because realistically, I'm not going to lie to you, Social Security is probably not going to end up being there when we're all old. So, in closing, with 44 million people or 45 million people out there in the U.S. with student loans, it's likely that someone that is affected by these loans. It does present a drain on each person that has them. When I was paying mine down, I didn't really do a lot of the things that normal people do, since I was putting so much money into my student loans. I'm glad that I did that at this point, because now I can save and I don't have this huge debt hanging over my head. Since a debt like that can have such a huge effect on people's lives, I can definitely understand why those 45 million people out there want their student loans forgiven. If you are one of those 45 million Americans that have loans, take the time to understand where everyone else is coming from. Understand that, there are people out there that don't believe that their tax dollars should go to pay for student loans that they're not really actually even going to see any benefit from. A person that went to college has the ability to earn significantly more money over their lifetime than a person that does not go to college. And it's roughly $30,000 a year. So $30,000 over the course of 40 years is a lot of money. I think I've heard people say that it's on average $1 million extra over the course of a lifetime that a person with a college degree earns more than a person without. That's why I think that it's unfair for the working Americans without a college education to pay taxes that will go to take care of the $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. I possibly, maybe can see the argument if you remove the $680 billion that there are for people with graduate degrees. I have seen a lot of tweets about all of this stuff. And some of the more popular ones are, from AOC. And there's one more recently where she makes the comment, things were bad for me, so they should be bad for everyone else, is not a good argument against cancellation, against debt cancellation, student, medical, or otherwise. And, she has a point. Just because things are bad for one person doesn't mean that they have to be bad for everybody else. But I don't agree with her point on student loans and the fact that they should be forgiven. I'm not wishing that anybody be in debt forever, but I do believe that when people take on a debt, that they should honor that debt. Congress should focus more on not letting these young kids get taken advantage of by huge loan servicers, and maybe they should regulate the amount of money that a person should get for a particular degree, the amount of money that someone can borrow for a particular degree. Earning potential should be factored into a degree. I'm not going to sit here and talk trash on any degree out there. My degree is in psychology, and I do not work in the field of psychology. So I definitely understand. But I had my debt, and I paid my debt. I believe that we need to solve the issue of why college is so expensive, so we don't end up in this situation in the future. Encourage people to take a trade job out of high school, vice going to a 4-year college. That would be a good thing. If we allow the government to step in and bail out people, we are just encouraging bad loan practices in the future. I know that we live in an unfair world, but I think that it's unfair to bail out people that took student loans so that they could have the ability to earn more money than the people that were responsible with their money. And I'll be honest, if I still had loans, I might have a different opinion. I might feel differently about this. But you can pay them off. It may seem like a daunting task. It may seem like it's impossible, but it's possible. You can do it. it's just going to take some time. You're just going to have to, grit your teeth, and stick to it. Time is on your side. So anyway, that's all for today. I might end up having a video later this week talking about, Thanksgiving. I think I'm going to talk about the things that I'm thankful for. Maybe get away from all this doom and gloom with, elections and student loans and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll talk about the things that I'm thankful for and see what I can come up with. So anyway, thanks for listening. And if you are listening on YouTube, make sure you leave me a comment. What is it? What do you think about this student loan crisis? Is a solution having the government pay these things off? Am I missing something? And maybe am I not seeing things from every angle? I could be missing something. I'm always looking for extra ways to grow, extra ideas. So if I'm overlooking something, make sure you leave me a comment. I'll read it and see what I can do. Make sure you subscribe, and if you like everything that you hear, and make sure you subscribe even if you don't like what you hear. Listening to differing opinions is good for us. We don't need to be stuck in an echo chamber. I personally welcome the differing opinions. So until the next episode, I'll see you later.